So for today's format, it's the same if you've joined us in the past. We want this to be a conversation, and you can send your questions to us through the chat. You can raise your hand in your Zoom screen. You can just speak right up during the discussion. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking so that we don't hear what's happening in the background. The meeting will be recorded and shared on our YouTube channel, and we can put that link in the chat at the end. We record all of our community forums, so you can watch afterward and you can share them with people. And at the end of the meeting, we'll have a short post-meeting survey. It'll pop up on your screen so that we can collect your feedback, and we'll ask you questions about like what you want to learn about in the future. And I think, hi Ricky. We've got Ms. Ricky Fairley joining us today. I think is Hayley going to be joining us? Oh, Ricky, you're on mute.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. How are you?
It's so good to see you. I was going to introduce Hayley, but are you going to be speaking with us today?
It will be me. We had a snafu. She's in the car.
Okay, no problem. It's such a pleasure to see you. We're so grateful to have you joining us today so that you can share what's happening with Touch, the Black Breast Cancer Alliance. I'm like really interested to hear what's going on with the programming you guys are working on. It seems like you've got a lot going on in the past year since I last heard from you. I know that we've had you present before, but you've got some new things going on with the Soundbite project and doing Black breast education. So we wanted you and Hayley to join us. We're happy to see you. I was going to introduce Hayley. This is Ricky Fairley's daughter. Do you want to share any slides, or should I just give you some time to going on?
We don't really have any slides, so is it okay if I just talk?
Oh yeah, please do.
It is all good, and we'll monitor the chat for you to look
Great.
for.
Hey, Dr. Laura.
Hey, Ricky.
So, well, we have lots going on. We just came home, which is why we're a little screwed up here, is from 2 weeks on Martha's Vineyard, and we've been there since August 8th, really. I actually was there to do a TED Talk on the 8th, and then for the last 2 weeks, we created what we're calling a Black Health Hub on Martha's Vineyard. And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, but a lot of the bougie Black people in America actually go to Martha's Vineyard during the month of August. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I can explain it. I'm sure the Black people know what I'm talking about, but it's a thing.
Well, better not invite anyone in the Trump administration.
I know. I mean, there were quite a few Obama sightings, Michelle sightings, Sasha and Malia sightings, Valerie Jarrett sightings, because they are all there during this time. So usually the first week of August, there's like a Black Film Festival, and then they call it the Greek Week, when all the Black sororities and fraternities come up, and it's like craziness. But they take over the island, this little, really one town of the island, Oak Bluffs. And so it's kind of a thing. And we've been going there for this was our 4th year going there. The first year I just did my show there. The second year we did a little party with my show. Last year we actually took the BEXA Alliance team with us, and we did BEXA scanning, and we scanned 55 women, and we found 3 cancers. So after that experience, we said we really need to do more. So we did double the scanning. So we did really 8 days of BEXA scanning. We scanned 158 women and found no cancers, which is great. But we did health programming pretty much every day. So this is our first time actually going beyond breast cancer. We did a day on the cancers, what I call the Black cancer. So breast, prostate, lung, multiple myeloma, and colon. We did a day talking about clinical trials. We did a day on mental health, mental wellness. We did 2 days for moms, be the CEO of your own health. And we did all the things like high blood pressure, kidney disease, sickle cell. We did a day on HIV. We did a day on cardiology, because we now have a new cholesterol marker, LP little a, lipoprotein A, that Black people are getting, basically genetic disease from genetic heart disease. So we kind of covered all the topics. We had a party the last night called the Booby Trap. That was Hayley's idea. And everybody wore like bustiers. I don't know what happened. There were a lot of boobs hanging out. But we had this great, huge house on, I was out, maybe I'll show a picture, that was like on the path to the beach, right on the beach. So everybody had to pass our house to get to the beach or park their car. So we were like the sort of the talk of the town. So every morning there's this thing called the Polar Bears. And it's this group of Black women who started this in the 40s. And they go in this frigid water. Well, you guys have frigid water in California, but frigid water at 7:30. And they do an hour of like water aerobics and chanting
Yeah, it's called the Polar Bear Club out here too.
okay. So they chant, they meditate, they sing the spiritual songs. It's like a really spiritual experience, but they do it every morning. So, and then they kind of, on Mondays, they have a big breakfast on the beach. So the second Monday we were there, it was really windy. That was when the hurricane hit. We had this hurricane on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And so they all came to have porch. We had 50 women polar bears on our porch for breakfast on Monday. So our house was like the party house. Literally, people would come drive by at night and back up and drive by again. Like, what's going on in that house? And could just come in the house. So we fed a lot of people, but it was a really great thing. And now we're trying to figure out how to escalate it for next year. Here we go again. But that was a really, really great time. And we broadcasted live on blackdoctor.org every panel, and we got like 65,000 views on Facebook Live over the 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. Do you have recaps of the different panels that
Yeah,
were?
yeah. It's all on our Facebook page. If you go on our Facebook page, it says Touch Talks Wellness. So everything that we broadcasted is there. It's all on Black Doctor too, but you can find it on our Touch page. We're gonna put together a recap that we could send to you, Steph. But if you want to watch any of the panels, they're all there. The last day we were there, I went to an event, I guess one of the nights, and I hooked up with one of the national past presidents of the Links Incorporated. If you don't know what the Links are, it's this group of bougie Black women. My mom, your mom has to be a link to be a link. It's like this whole thing, a cult. But I met with one of the presidents. She's actually from Oakland, Dr. Glenda Newell Harris. Do you know her, Laura?
I do. I've met her once.
Yeah. So I saw her at an event, and so she's like, well, I want to talk on a panel. So she came the last day and then brought all the links to our house, which was pretty cool. Because she actually wrote a book about advocacy, about self-advocacy. That's pretty good. So that was sort of our most recent craziness that we did. In May, we celebrated our 5th anniversary, which was it was the first time we've ever really done a fundraiser. And we had a big gospel brunch and a weekend full of activities and panels. So that was one thing. But other than that, we've been, doing our thing. Our web series continue to grow like crazy. The Doctor is in. I still get 5,000 to 10,000 viewers every Wednesday. Hayley gets like 7,000 to 10,000 viewers on her Pink Table Talk on the last Sunday of the month, talking about Black breast health. We take you guys everywhere. You were in our bags on the vineyard. We take you guys to all of our events and talk about you. We're actively involved in Sambai. Sambai is a research project that we're working on with Melissa Davis of Morehouse School of Medicine. She's an amazing genomicist, and she has been doing research in Africa for about the past 15 years and has identified a gene called the Duffy null gene, which is attributing to triple negative breast cancer in West Africa. I could probably have that gene. I don't have any genetic mutations, but I'm the 3rd generation in my family with breast cancer. Our study was started. So a Cancer Grand Challenge is basically a global research study. They give out, it's funded by NIH, half NIH and half Cancer Research of the UK. They give out 5 grants every 2 years for $25 million, and it has to be a global study. So Melissa is the first Black woman to get the study. She got it last May, so we've been into it for a year and a couple of months. And we're studying the social determinants of health, the genetics, the genomics, and the exposomics, the environment for breast cancer, prostate, and pancreatic cancer. And the countries that we're covering are the US, the UK, Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Zambia. And so we're starting into year 2. And we actually had focus groups in Ghana this morning from my office, but we were in Ghana this morning at the Peace and Love Hospital, Dr. Beatrice Adai's hospital. But we're actually in the middle right now. So it's also the first time that a Cancer Grand Challenge has incorporated or allowed for a patient advocate to be a PI in the study. So I'm a PI in the study with all these amazing, brilliant scientists. And I have a team of patient advocates now from really from all of those countries now, where we are actively involved with each of the work packages, working with the scientists. So I kind of called on all of my friends that I know here, like Tia Tomlin is on our team. Do you know Tia Tomlin from Atlanta? Keith Crawford from FEN, Prostate Health Education Network. Ifeanyi Bwaku, who's has a African advocacy group here in the DC area. So they're all on the team. But now we've built relationships with advocacy groups in all the countries and at all the sites that we're at. And so we are actively in the process of building the recruiting materials for the patients. So it's kind of a weird message, because we're going to them saying, we're doing this big research project, it's global, but it's not going to really help your cancer because it's not a clinical trial. But can we have just a little bit of your blood? You know, the blood they take out when you get scanned, when you get checked. Can we just take a little bit of your blood and we're going to help your grandchildren? So it's interesting communication, because we're not really helping people, you know, immediately, but we're trying to build a legacy. So our tagline that we're using is, we are the science we've been waiting for. And we're building a whole.
I think that's a good tagline. I mean, I think people who participate in trials in general are altruistic.
Yeah.
I mean, what we want to do, I think the problem with the way a lot of trials have been designed is that they really are organized to be primarily altruistic instead of good for you and good for the future. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things with both recast, with the DCIS active surveillance study, as well as iSpy, that what we're trying to do is say there's direct benefit to you because we are trying to tailor recommendations for you based on your response. And by the way, everything we learn will help the next person who comes after you.
Yeah, exactly.
But for trials that are really not about that, is to say, you know, I mean, this is sort of the same message you and I have talked about over and over again, and say, part of the problem is we don't know enough. And we're really trying to, I think one of the things that you can say, and this will be, I think, an important message for wisdom, is that, you know, we'll have our results presented at the end of this year and be able to say, okay, here's what we learned from 1.0. We know that there's much more we can do to further fine tune risk assessment. And in order to do that well, we really need to know people's background and background ancestry. And that will really help us do a better job for each person who comes in. And everything we learn will help everyone in the future. You know, and you know, that this is an investment. If you think about it, your investment now is an investment in 5 years, having this turn into a very different way of screening.
Yeah.
And tailoring both your way that you might apply early detection, the way that you might make decisions that might affect your breast cancer risk, and decisions about what you can do to reduce your risk.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
we don't do the work, 5 years from now, we'll be in the same boat.
In the same boat. Exactly. Exactly. And that's what we're kind of selling, is the legacy that we're building, you know, that we have to advance the science. And you know, clearly we're looking at genetics, we're looking at ancestry, we're looking at, you know, we had in our focus group today, we had a long talk about a bunch of them talk about the environment, and they have this illegal mining going on all over Ghana. And one of the main places was Kumasi, where the Peace and Love Hospital is. So they're basically saying they're being affected by all the chemicals in the air from the mining. And so there's a lot of things. So now we're going to try to map out where the sites are relative to some of the environmental stuff. So our
you know, it's very interesting. We did a study in Nigeria, and I was working with a team that Fumi introduced me to from Abia State, which is right on the Niger Delta, which is where all the oil is. and where all the oil is pulled out. And then we also looked at cancers. So Fumi has all the cancers from Ibadan, which is the university hospital. And I'll tell you, very similar to what we see in the US. So a more poor community, environmental, like often around the areas where county hospitals are in the US.
Yeah,
There's it's an environmental justice issue, right? But you have a lot of environmental features,
yeah,
right? You see higher grade cancers. And no one has ever been able to explain this. No one has really explained it, but
yeah,
it's just kind of inadvertently we saw it in Nigeria, and there's another place where you see it again. So that these are common things that in places where you have more environmental dumping. I mean, very hard to necessarily tease out what the issues are, right? Because you have, you know, is it, you know, uh, less resource that people have, or poverty, or, that people are more stressed, or that there's environmental dumping in these areas that's unfettered. You don't know, but there's definitely a difference.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's probably true internationally, just as it is in every country.
Right. I think they all have nuances. And even in Ghana, like just some of the cultural nuances, like, if you cut your boobs off, your husband wants a divorce, or you're shunned from your village. You can't go home. I mean, and the men have to give permission for you to get care. And so these women will come to Dr. Beatrice, and basically she'll have to find a home for them, because she can give them treatment. And, so there's so many different factors that we don't even face here, but some of these,
Well, at least not yet, Ricky.
at least not yet, right? Here it comes, right? Here we go, right? Here we go. Any minute now, right?
Well, I mean, literally, I mean, there's a new edict about how we have to take out everything about diversity training because everyone's worried that all their funding is going to be taken away. I mean, I can't
Right.
even believe that. I can't believe that people are agreeing to all of this.
I know. Well, I know it's crazy. Well, even like so Soundbite is funded half by NIH and half by Cancer Research of the UK. And so the funding is reallocated on May 1st, right? So this year, the Cancer
They
Research
get-
UK came to Melissa and said, you know what, we're not even going to put this on the table for NIH. We're going to not let you get rejected. So we're going to fund you this year. So they're funding our whole year. It's like, the 5 years we get the funding every year. But they basically said, we're not even going to let NIH get involved in making a decision here. So they can't reject.
That's probably a good thing because I can promise you, I mean, they've gotten rid of USAID. They've gotten, I mean,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Our
So
R1 got trashed because it's about diversity. So,
yeah. So we'll see what happens. So that's one project. What else can I talk about? We are actively working on building relationships with our pharma partners to recruit Black women for clinical trials. So now we have projects with Genentech, with Novartis, and with AstraZeneca, where we're actively recruiting Black women for trials.
I have
And
a question for you, Ricky.
mm-hmm.
Last year at this time, this was all big news. We had Anna Eshu's bill. We had all this effort in trying to sort of change the who gets recruited. And, Anna Eshu's bill has not gone into law and won't because they didn't. I mean, there has to be this whole reconciliation process. So even though it was passed, it's not going into law. So that was even just requiring the tracking of this and making it an issue. Have you seen a retraction by the companies now that they aren't forced to do this? Has less interest or not?
You know what? I haven't seen it. And well, when all this started to happen, I literally called all of our advocacy partners, Laura, and said, okay, so what's the deal? What are you guys going to do? Because frankly, and actually, Lauren Davis at Genentech explained to me, Ricky, we are all government contractors because they make drugs for Medicare and Medicaid, right? So I never thought about it that way. But I don't feel that at all. I feel like I still feel their commitment. And we've had more companies reach out to us. I just met with Jazz Pharmaceuticals today, who I don't even know what they make, who want to play
They
with
make
us.
zanidatamab.
Okay,
They
well,
make, they make neurologic drugs. They
right.
make,
They
they
want to.
make the HER2 bispecific antibodies. They're a good company.
Yeah, they called today. They want to do some navigation. Want us to do some navigation for them. So I'm not feeling it yet. Thank you, God. Let me, pray, knock on wood, do all the things. I'm seeing that they're stepping it up. And that they have
Really?
not changed their game on the clinical trial recruiting. And they're hiring us to do it, to provide our navigation services and to help with the marketing materials. So I mean, I feel like, they have to make drugs. That's how they make money. They can't really slow that down.
Well, they can slow down whether they pay attention to it, because it is actually extra work. I think they're probably banking on the fact that this won't last that long, and if it stops, then they're going to be
Yeah,
held to account for having terrible recruitment of
right,
non-white people.
right, right. But I've had, I don't want to say the opposite effect, but I definitely have gotten a lot more calls to help.
Well, you've got a lot more calls because you're well known. I think that probably is, and I've heard that there is, a de-emphasis, and maybe they're just gonna go with the people that they know are good. But I pay attention to that, and
Yeah, yeah. Oh, we watch it all the time, and I don't take anything for granted, I don't take anything for granted. I keep waiting for like the rainy day to happen,
Mhm.
But so far we've had, people reaching out.
Well, and the reason I say this is because there is, just today, across all of the training programs, across not only all the UCs, but everywhere, there's like a new required training that basically says that you can't say anything about anyone's race or gender or anything, and even to the point of getting rid of in-person interviews. That you can't have any programs that say you're looking for people to recruit who specifically are
Right.
like people that you want to recruit, who might have the conditions that you're trying to recruit. This is not just breast cancer. So this just came
Right.
down today for training programs.
Isn't that crazy?
It is absolutely crazy. I mean, it's just kind of, it's one of these things, is, are we just gonna turning a blind eye and just pretending none of this is really even happening?
Right. I don't know. I keep believing that God's in control and that something
Really?
break. Yeah, I know. I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen. I mean, I think they're gonna push it as far as they can, but I forget where I was recently. It was before I went away, but one of my kids are political, Linda and Kyle both worked in the White House, and so I was with one of their friends, and she was showing me how Trump basically manipulated the last election, and they basically geo-targeted young white men and told them that there was a draft, told them that the Democrats were going to instill a draft. And I mean, they told him a bunch of other bullshit things, but that's what got the vote, because they were afraid they were going to get drafted. And she showed me this whole chart, all the Facebook communication and Instagram communication, basically saying, here's why you shouldn't vote Democratic, because you could get drafted and go to war. But they basically outsmarted Democrats by geo-targeting, young white men. And the white moms. So when the mom saw my son could get drafted, who'd they vote for?
Well, how'd that work out for everybody?
Right.
Hey, Ricky, I have a question for you. I know since Hayley's not here, and one thing that has changed in the wisdom study, as you know, in the last couple of years, is starting to enroll women who are younger. And I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit more about your efforts in educating younger women
Yeah.
about breast health, and even, some of the statistics that I know you talk about all the time would be great to hear.
Yeah. So we know that Black women under 35 get breast cancer at twice the rate of white women and die at 3 times the rate. We know that 40% of TNBC patients are under the age of 40. We know that the data shows that Black women under 30 have a 50% higher mortality rate than white women. So the incidence is higher, whereas overall incidence for Black women is a little bit slightly lower. So what's that about, right? Is it about the science? Is it about the biology? Is it about the disease? Whatever. So our efforts have, so we basically have sort of kept up and embraced what we're doing for the Love of My Girls. So if you go to loveofmygirls.org, spelled GURLS, you'll see our crazy website that's really fun, and we do a lot of events in the community. And one of the sort of best-selling things that we do is our worksheet for Know Your Her Story. So you can download this worksheet, or you can now do it online, where you sort of fill in all the diseases in your family. You sit down with both your grandmas and you work out what's happening in your family, so you know what your risk is. And that's kind of when we talk about the wisdom study and all the things that you guys are doing as well. But Black families don't talk about health, which is why Martha's Vineyard is such a great thing for us to do, because families come there, generational families come. You got the grandma, the auntie, the mom, the kid, the grandchild, all in one house, staying together for a week or 2-week vacation. And so we try to encourage these families to talk. They don't really talk until they're in a crisis, until Uncle Pookie gets his leg amputated, or Grandma Edith is in the hospital. How'd that happen? So we try to, foster these conversations in Black families to get them to sit down and figure out who died of what is your risk, who had cancer, who had high blood pressure, who had whatever, and it crosses the spectrum on all diseases. So that's one of our tools. We have our HBCU internship program, and we've now had 105 interns. We're actually hiring our fall crew right now from about 50 schools. And we kind of grew it organically by the students, not by working with the schools. But so our interns usually kind of help us get the next group. We had Donovan, actually Dr. Keith Crawford's son, work for us all summer. He's writing a jingle for all of our programming. So he's like a music kid, but he's been working for us all summer, and he's been talking about cancer on his own TikTok, prostate and breast. So we're hiring our next crew. I think last spring we had 5. Last fall we had 15. That was too many. But they're on TikTok making videos. I don't really go on TikTok, so they do show me the videos every now and then of how to do a self-exam. But our data shows that we have them do a survey when they start and then a survey when they end. And they all talk about how great they feel about being able to make an impact with their peers and with their families. We ask them to make a video with their mom or their grandma talking about breast health. And in most of the cases, it's the first time they've ever had that conversation with their mom. And so, I think we've had actually 6 boy interns, young men, and they did it because somebody in their family that they love had breast cancer. And they've been really good. Actually, 2 were nursing students, actually, and their moms had breast cancer. So that, we still are, moving ahead with that. We'll hire another crew, and we love them. They stay with us for life. They usually end up doing it a couple times because we can't get rid of them. But they stay in our family. On our 5th anniversary, our interns did all the work. They came back and hung out with us, and helped us decorate and do all the labor to get the room set up. And so they're all really, really great kids. Our first intern just graduated from Vanderbilt Medical School. They're all sophomore and junior pre-med students, or pre-health career, pre-provider students. We also, just a few weeks ago, launched a new page on our Touch BBCA website for young women with breast cancer. Because For the Love of My Girls is really for women who aren't sick. And we felt like we were sort of missing a little, missing the ones that we're sick, because there's so many of them that call us. we felt like we needed to service them a little better. So we launched a webpage of resources just for them on touchbbca.org. If you go to the website, you'll see the tab for young women. And so that just launched really in mid-July. What else can I tell you?
And
Great.
maybe about, you mentioned the pink table talk and also the
Yeah.
Wednesday meetings, just a little more info about those. And I think we
Yeah.
linked to some of the websites, but if people are interested in joining those too.
Sure. Our websites are touchbbca.org, loveofmygirls.org, whenwetrial.org. So When We Trial is our platform for educating about clinical trials. And as of last Monday, when we left for the vineyard, when we started the vineyard, we've now signed up 28,562 Black women into our portal for trial searches. So that's going strong. We still talk about that a lot of events. And then our last website is blacktnbcsanctuary.org, and that's specifically for Black women with TNBC. It's also in Spanish. We partnered with the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation, with AACR, and with Nueva Vida. They're a small Latina organization in DC. And so everything is in Spanish. Everything is in Spanish. So we got a lot of their input as well.
So Ricky, what are you using for the group of trials that you can help match people to? Do you have a matching tool, or would you like
Yeah,
to?
we partner with CareBox. So we used to have breastcancertrials.org on our page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's our, we developed that, right?
I know.
Yeah.
It's
is it not working?
No, it was working fine, but we decided, so we had you guys, we had the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation's trial portal, and we had NBC Alliance trial portal. But we wanted to have one trial portal so we could track it better and see what was going on, because the patients would go into your portal or into the other two portals, and we could never keep track of them. So we couldn't really count what was happening. So we work with a company called CareBox, and they built our own portal for us, and that's what we use now. So now we can track them and get their data on what disease they have.
Do they have the list of all the breast cancer trials?
Yes, they go right into clinicaltrials.gov. So they basically put a hug around clinicaltrials.gov, but we can watch the women, and if they get stuck, we can help them. So it's kind of like your site, but it's we get more information than we were getting from you guys. You know what I mean? You get information for your site. So now we can watch them and see where they get stuck and try to.
We could easily, I mean, not that you should change. I'm just saying that we would have been happy to give it back to you if you wanted it.
Yeah.
But I'll look up and see who they are, and I just wonder how they're keeping up, and do they have all the same things that we have?
Yeah, I think so. We checked them out thoroughly, and they're pretty thorough. I think they run search engines for a lot of different people, or organizations. And I can give you their contact info, but now we can track the age, the subtype, well, when they got diagnosed, kind of all, kind of sort of the critical factors of their health that's driving them to a trial. And then when they get stuck, we get an email saying, this person got stuck on whatever, on giving us their subtype. And we can reach out to them and call them and say, okay, how can we help you?
Speaking of subtype, there have been a couple questions in the chat to define TNBC.
Go, Dr. Laura.
So there are lots of different ways to characterize breast cancers, but the sort of the key thing that people have is that they have certain receptors on the surface. There's kind of markers. If you think about it, is like if you're a cell, are you waving your hand? Are you waving an elbow? There are different kind of markers and things. So a common thing that's on the surface of a cell is a receptor for one of the hormones, estrogen receptor. So estrogen, progesterone, and there's another one called HER2. These are things that when they come in and dock, and they stimulate the cell to grow. So HER2 is a typical one of the ways we treat HER2. Patients who have HER2 as a receptor upregulated, having lots of it on the cell surface, We can give an antibody that blocks it. We can have an antibody that also brings in the immune system to destroy things. There are antibody drug toxins that basically help target and deliver a bomb to the cell when they ingest it, or, kind of when it binds. For estrogen receptors, things, that tells you, oh, I can give something that blocks the estrogen receptor or gets rid of the estrogen receptor on it. So these are typical ways that we treat things. And there are some cells that we call are negative, that don't have anything on the cell surface that you would bind to. These are so-called triple negative, meaning because estrogen, progesterone, and HER2 are negative. So those are the big three. However, that's not all that we know. There are some kind of hormone negative and HER2 negative tumors that also have things that make them susceptible, that they are working to sort of suppress the immune system, and some where it's not. And so there are new ways of characterizing cells called using an immune signature. And so there's a lot of work. Sort of the standard thing is that we have now increased the use of drugs called immunotherapy or immuno-oncology drugs. There's something called PD-1. It basically blocks signaling, which then takes the brake off the immune response. One of the ways in which tumor cells have adapted is they can sort of shut down the ability of the body to recognize a cell that's gone rogue, like a cancer cell. So the immune system doesn't do its job in trying to clear it. And so these new immuno-oncology drugs, there's many of them out there, can actually serve to block that, block the protection that the cancer cells have gotten, and then make these cells sensitive. Now, most people think that all triple negative breast cancers respond well to these immunotherapies or immuno-oncology drugs. That's not the case. About 2/3 of them do, but a third of them don't. And you get the same side effects regardless. So one of the new things that we've been trying to do is characterize cells as immune negative or immune positive. So triple negative doesn't tell you that kind of information, but that's one of the things that we're working on to try and help. And it turns out also that people don't realize that there are some hormone positive tumors that also respond to immunotherapy. And so there are increasingly going to be better ways to actually guide therapy. In general, when people talk about triple negative breast cancers, they're talking about fast-growing tumors. These are tumors that often come up between screens because they grow pretty fast. The HER2 cancers also do that same thing. So you could have had a mammogram that was normal 6 months ago and have a lump. You shouldn't ignore it, because a new mass is a new mass. And it's either a cyst or it's a cancer. There's not a whole lot that suddenly pops up like that. So you always have to check it out. So in general, triple negative cancers don't respond. You can't treat them even when they're small with hormone therapy. You have to use something like chemotherapy. Now, chemotherapy is actually it's actually a fairly targeted treatment too. It works better for tumors that grow fast, and it doesn't work very well for tumors that grow slow. That's what all these other assays like Oncotype and Mammoprint and so on and so forth, that's what that's all about, is trying to find out who's going to be the good responders or not. Now, most people think that all triple negative cancers will kill you. That is also not true. We know from registries of
I'm here.
There you are. And she didn't have immunotherapy either. So one of the things that I think is really important, we know this from registries, and this is why registries are so important. There is a data set from Finland and a data set from the UK where we know what was the chance of having a stage 1 triple negative breast cancer. What's the chance without any therapy that it would kill you? These are from the 60s. It's probably only about 15%. 10, 15%, whereas someone with a really big cancer that's not treated, it might be something like 60%. The other thing that we know that's about these cancers is it's not necessarily where you start that matters, it's what kind of response you have. And that's why for all these things like triple negative or HER2 positive, the best thing that we can do is whatever therapy you have, you're better off starting with that up front, because what kind of response you have is what determines how good an outcome you're going to have. And this tells you that maybe you can have less. That's a lot of what we're trying to do in the I-SPY trials, is trying to figure out how can we give the most impactful, least amount of therapy, as opposed to giving people therapy for a long period of time when there really is no proof that it will necessarily help you. That's a very long answer to your question, but that is, we really trying to understand the different types of tumors and what they respond to is really important. I think a couple other things is that if you inherit a mutation like BRCA1, that is a predictor that the kind of cancer you're going to get is triple negative. If you're BRCA2, most people get hormone positive tumors. And the other thing that we actually know, which is one of the reasons why we are screening people at an earlier age, is that in the patients with mutations, about 30% of them didn't have any family history, or they didn't report any family history. So we have tools to really look for the abnormalities in the genes you inherit, that it's cheaper than a mammogram. And that's what we're trying to show with wisdom, is that knowing your genetic status directly is probably the most important thing, even more important than knowing your family history. And it's something that it's, at least in the wisdom study, is easy to obtain. And we're going to hopefully, when the results come out, hopefully this will change and that population-based screening could be useful. Now, it's pretty rare to have one of these mutations, but if you have one, it's really impactful, not only for breast cancer, but for ovarian cancer too. So those
And
are just important.
prostate. So,
And
so
prostate.
Dr. Laura, if you think about the genetic panel that we use, though, were Black people represented in that development? Are there genes, for example, like could I have the Duffy null gene, because we don't test for it here?
Well, it's possible. So one of the things so far, I mean, maybe Melissa will find, Melissa Davis will find something else. But I think Fumi has shown in Nigeria that the rate of certain founder mutations or key mutations in certain genes, it really is the study of population migration. So she studied tons and tons of women in Nigeria, and has shown that there is something that's very similar. Just like Jewish people, there's one or two mutations that are common, but that's that population, and it's 1 to 2%. There's one that's almost that common in Nigeria, but it's within the standard way that we do gene testing. And and it is important. This is one of the reasons why it's so important for women of different races and ethnicity to participate in trials, because, the more we know, the better we'll be able to help everybody, because over time populations mix, and depending on what you inherit, you might have one of those. So we want to look for it for everyone.
Right.
But, a lot of people think, oh, because I'm Jewish, I'm at high risk. You aren't. You might have a 1 to 2% chance of having a mutation, but if you don't have it, you're not at any higher risk than anybody else. And the same thing as when we started these forums, a lot of Black women said, oh, that's the Jewish gene. I don't have that, or I couldn't have that. That's not true either.
That's not true. Yeah.
And the thing about it is it doesn't really matter. And we know actually that there's another way to look at the genes you inherit. And that's looking at this kind of broad brush of looking at 1 million genes. Each one of them by themselves doesn't mean much, but we're learning that certain populations have risk for certain types of what we call polygenic gene risk, polygenic risk. So when you get your blood tested, so that's one of the things that we're doing in Wisdom, is that we can actually use all those genes to figure out what your ancestry is, regardless of what you think it is or would say it is. There's actually a way to see what your ancestry is and figure out the best polygenic risk to use. We have one for Black women now that looks pretty good. This is from Fomi's lab, from Dejang. And we're actually getting ready to implement that. That should be up and running in a couple of months in Wisdom. There's an overall one that's for hormone negative. That's been better tested on white women, but between both of them, we think, and there's one for Latina women, which we also have now. So it is something, and it's interesting, I think Asian women have a little higher risk of getting HER2 positive disease. So there are differences, and it doesn't mean that there's no black or white, so to speak. I mean, there isn't like one group gets one thing and the other gets something else. Everyone's increasingly a blend of things. That's why it's so important for all of us to participate, because no participation, no representation, right? And we can't make it
Right.
do better. And that's why it's just so important that we have enough people. The one thing that is true, and Henry, I'll get to your question in a minute, is there's something called a variant of unknown significance. We call it a VUS, variant.
That's what I have. That's what I have.
So it's very interesting. There's where, when you haven't tested enough of the population, your variants of unknown significance can actually be significant. There just haven't been enough people who've been tested for you to know that that is actually something that's common. So what they do is they look to see whatever, whatever those are, right? So I think by what Melissa Davis is doing, what Fumi is doing, what we are doing, what a number of other groups are doing, as we get larger populations studied, we'll be able to classify those so-called variants of unknown significance into those that aren't meaningful and those that are.
Right.
But those are things that we track, and those things I think are pretty important. That I think is probably where most of the change is going to happen going forward, is my guess.
Yeah.
Henrietta, you had a question?
Yes, thanks so much. I have two questions in the chat. One is, what's the relationship between hormone therapy and the occurrence of breast cancer?
Oh, big topic.
Yes, and also, are the genes for prostate cancer more aligned with the mother or the father's gene? Are there any correlations that have been discovered?
Well, some of these mutations in a woman can predispose you to breast cancer, whereas in a man, they can predispose you to prostate cancer. Breast cancer, even in someone who's a mutation carrier of BRCA1 or 2, the risk for a man might be 8%, whereas it might be 65% for a woman. So again, just because you have the gene doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the cancer. It just puts you at higher risk. Now, 8% is the average risk for a woman, but it's very high for a man because their average risk is under 1%, right? So it's very, very small. So hormone therapy, I think the data we know show us that estrogen alone is probably not a risk factor for breast cancer. It does, however, increase your risk of cardiovascular risk or heart disease, especially if you take it in pill form, where it's processed through the liver first. That taking it as a patch is better. So if you don't, the reason people give progesterone with estrogen is that estrogen by itself can cause a buildup of the lining of the uterus. And if you don't ever shed the uterus, that can increase your risk of getting a uterine cancer or an endometrial cancer. Now, most of those are usually very low grade. So, but nonetheless, often what people do is combine estrogen with a progesterone. Now, we know from the Women's Health Initiative and many other studies that when you combine those two things, that does increase your risk for breast cancer. It doesn't mean you're going to get it. It just increases your risk. It seems that there's a lot of marketing that's telling women that every woman has to have hormone replacement therapy, which is actually not true. If you take something in your 50s for a short period of time, you're much less likely to have it than if you take it for a long time, especially on into your 60s. There are schools of thought, and people think that the type of progesterone makes a difference in what your risk is. It's not clear that we have that much data that helps us with that. Part of the reason we've started this Rise Up conference, which by the way will be February 19th to the 21st, is to try and do a better job of figuring out all the times at which we're already giving women hormones of some kind, with an eye to thinking about, could we have the imagination to develop things that will be risk producing for breast cancer? We got lucky for ovarian cancer that taking the pill reduces your risk of ovarian cancer, but that was pure luck. Now we know so much more. Why can't we work on the medicines we use for cycle control, for birth control, for IVF, for
Right.
endometriosis, for fibroids, for hormone replacement, for weaning, all of these things. So we're trying to encourage the field and start thinking about it so we can make all of this less.
You mentioned hormone therapy via a patch and also the pill. What about as a gel?
It depends on whether you're using estrogen or progesterone. So estrogen by itself, again, does not really increase your breast cancer risk, but it does, you do absorb enough from either the skin, or especially people use it in the vagina, that you really get, you can absorb the same amount as if you take a pill. Now, one of the questions is, if you've had a breast cancer, especially a hormone positive breast cancer, you know, what do all the medical oncologists say? The medical oncologists all say you can't have any estrogen, although you can have estrogen that works locally, like estring or Vagifem, that just is enough to make sure that the vaginal lining is moist, but not enough to get absorb enough to change the amount of estrogen in your system. I think that we're going to have a big debate about all that. There are two schools of thought that like no estrogen is good, and some are saying, well, you know, it all depends. It depends what your, you know, I think for each person, you have to know what your risks and benefits are, and there can be some things that make a difference. There's a medicine that's being tested, Duave, which combines a very strong breast cancer risk reducing agent, beta-doxyphene, with estrogen called with a small amount of Premarin. That's called Duave. That actually is being tested by Carol Fabian in a study to see if it can reduce risk. It's a very promising, I think it's a very interesting combination. It's extremely, it makes people feel good. It gets rid of their symptoms. And if it's risk reducing, this is the kind of thing that we want to put forward. You know, again, I think we as advocates and women have to work harder to try and set the agenda and not let the agenda be set necessarily just by pharma, which, you know, this is a drug towards the end of its patent life. So it's going to be hard to get the company to generate any of these studies. And I think a lot of people that are trying to have something be used for the general public don't want to do studies to look at cancer or cancer risk reduction because they're worried about what the results might be. So it doesn't help us really improve the field and figure out how to do prevention better.
So
I
if I can, one
options.
last follow-up. You talk about the risk in terms of reduction of breast cancer, but what about the risk in terms of heart attacks and strokes?
So Duave has a very small amount of estradiol, does not appear to have that increased risk. You know, that's one of the reasons why you need these big studies that look at more than one thing. A standard dose of estrogen, the Women's Health Initiative, the combination of hormone therapy, estrogen and progesterone, synthetic progestin, was stopped because of the increased risk in breast cancer. And the estrogen only arm was not stopped because of breast cancer risk, but was stopped because of heart attacks and stroke. So the clotting risk. So again, the ideal thing would be beta-doxyphene with an estradiol patch, but we have to find someone who'd be interested in making it. But Duave is also, I think, pretty good and has a very and has a good track record, very low risk of stroke and heart disease.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. There's another question in the chat. Let's see.
I was gonna also say, Dr. Laura, that I feel like every other disease has a lot of options. Breast cancer still doesn't have a lot of options.
What do you mean? There are a lot of options.
I mean, there are more than there have been, like triple negative doesn't have a lot of options.
Well, there are increasingly many more options. There are
HER2
antibodies.
doesn't have a lot of options.
HER2 has a ton of options. HER2 has so many good options that, you know, I think within 5 years, the chance of having metastatic disease can be extremely low for HER2.
Great, that's great.
Extremely low, extremely low.
All right, so
mean,
you have to come on my show and talk about all this for me.
I'm happy to. Like we are testing an I-SPY, a bispecific antibody that is so incredibly well tolerated that, you know, we don't know the results. We'll know by the end of the year, but why would you not want to start with something so low risk that
Right.
could mean no chemo? I am imagining within 3 years, if we can get people to cooperate, that we could have chemotherapy-free combinations that would get rid of the risk of most HER2 positive breast cancer.
I love that. All right.
You know, what we have to do though is we have, you know, again, I think it's important for the agenda to be set by people who are really putting their patients first and not necessarily the pharma agenda first,
Right.
you know. But there are lots of antibody drug conjugates, lots of things that are out there. We have to, you know, keep moving these things forward in combinations. That's why having early endpoints that predict the end are what can really move things forward faster, like we did for heart disease and cardiology. That's how we got all these ways to reduce dying of heart disease.
Right, right. Well, that's what I was comparing it to, the number of drugs for heart disease.
Well, and a lot of them are me too, but the classes of drugs are 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And so you would think that some of that would have driven down the price, but somehow that's not the way it works. Economic free space, right?
You're going to answer another question?
Yeah, let's see. Who else had their, let's see. Oh, Marianne had a question. So Marianne, we'll look to, hopefully you will not be, you must have been re-invited to join the Wisdom 2.0, no? Were you in the annual arm? Marianne? Oh, Allison already answered.
Yeah, Laura, I'm looking it up and she gave me her email, so I'll follow up with her by email.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, yeah, so so just to give people an idea of what's happening with Wisdom, what's happening with Wisdom is we're working on the new hormone receptor negative predictors. So we're looking at one that is overall probably better for white women than working on the one that's works specifically well for Black women. And that is, we're working on getting all the requirements in, and hopefully in about 3 months, or at least by the end of the year, that will be live. We are working on trying to introduce mammographic AI, or the artificial intelligence way of looking at what part of the density is really making it risky. That is probably 10% of the people with dense breast tissue, so that we're not over screening people. And that will take us probably 3 or 4 months to get kind of up and implemented. We'll be testing it, and that probably will go live in the maybe the second quarter of 2026. And, you know, so as I said, after the end of the year, all the people who are in I-SPY 1 will be invited to participate in I-SPY 2. And I-SPY 2, we're really putting all our effort to trying to figure out how can we do a better job of predicting who's at risk for what kind of cancer? Is it slow growing or fast growing? And what kind of screening do you really need? And we're about 35,000 women into our second cohort, which is pretty good. After that, we probably will want to do Wisdom 3.0, where we're really encouraging people, you know, I think we'll really have the opportunity to find people who are at a lot lower risk, who don't need as much screening, and people who are at higher risk, who really do need a lot more screening. It's not going to be the majority of people. I think it'll probably be about 10% of people, 12% of people at the most that really need more screening. And if that really holds true, that's, I think, a huge advance for people.
Yeah.
So we can really focus the resources on the people most at risk and not, over screen or overburden people who have a much lower risk. So that's what we're up to in wisdom and how we want to apply this. And then I think a big opportunity is going to be to work on thinking about how do we reduce the risk even for things like triple negative breast cancer. There's actually one of the medicines that's used for heart disease risk reduction that might be useful in women at high risk. And the reason why it's so important to have good marker of who's at risk for triple negative cancer is because then if you have a small group of people that really do have a higher risk, like 10 to 20%, then you can really run prevention trials that would be meaningful. Without that, it's just not going to happen. So that's the vision. Our job is to go about making it happen with the help of all you guys.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending our forum today. Ricky, I appreciate you joining and diving right in with us and keeping us updated on all the good stuff you've got going on. And I missed seeing Hayley, so I'll give her.
I know she's looking pregnant these days. She's starting to get the waddle.
Oh, I'm so glad for her.
October 21st.
Oh my gosh, it's
Hey,
so
Stephanie, before
Yes.
we all sign out, I had already sent my survey response in, but what the doctor said right at the end made me think, what do you need from the wisdom study participants to help more with the next things on the agenda?
Oh, the
Maybe that
most
could be a
important.
topic.
Yeah, it is true, actually. The most important thing we need people to keep in touch with us and to let us know if anything, if they have a biopsy, if they have a diagnosis of cancer. That's the most important thing, is just doing, when they get the letter about the follow-up, please don't ignore it. No follow-up, then the data is not that helpful. So that's the most important thing. And we're going to invite everyone who hasn't had a diagnosis of cancer to join us for the next phase. And we hope everyone will do that. And again, if you're having trouble accessing something, to let us know. We'll work on that, and, just to make sure that you stay in touch with us. We have some exciting things planned. And one of those things that we have planned is, we'd love to have something where I always wanted to have the steps of women of wisdom, really, we know that exercise reduces your risk, and trying to encourage this as a way for women to be more health conscious and healthy. And so there's some projects like that we are really excited about. And if anybody is interested in, helping us get that message out, that would be great. That reminds me, Allison, one of the women who presented from Rise Up about her exercise study, especially for Black women. I wanted to see if we could sort of integrate that into wisdom in some way.
Okay, great.
Thanks for asking, Carrie.
Yes, yeah, all great topics. And I think next month, Steph, we have, what's our next topic?
Next month, on Monday, September 29th, 4 to 5 p.m. as usual, we've got Dr. Connie Lehman speaking with us about Clarity, which is the first FDA-approved mammographic AI, which is a tool that Wisdom is planning to partner with and launch in the coming year. So she's going to tell us about their AI tool for predicting breast cancer risk and how it works and all the interesting stuff that we need to know about it, the science behind it.
Yeah, wonderful. So we hope you join us. I see some questions still coming in and some links, so take a look at those. And otherwise, we will adjourn and let everyone have their evenings back. But thanks so much, everyone, for joining, and we'll catch you next
Thanks so
month.
much, Ricky.
Thank
Haley
Thank you,
says
Ricky.
hi. Haley just got home and says hi.